Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back in time to a place where the river wasn't just a river, it was the lifeline of an entire civilization. Imagine this: the warm breath of the desert presses gently against your skin while, just ahead, the great Nile glimmers under the early evening light. You can almost hear the slow swish of water against the wooden hulls of boats, tied lazily along the bank. Somewhere upstream, the last traces of the annual flood have pulled away, leaving rich, dark silt on the banks. It smells like earth after a rainstorm, but heavier, older, like history itself has a scent. If you'd lived here, in this precise moment thousands of years ago, you'd know the Nile wasn't just for water. It was the perfume highway, carrying delicate scents and rare oils from distant lands right to the heart of Egypt. And trust me, without it, not only would perfume culture have been impossible, but you probably wouldn't last a week. Between the desert heat, the sweaty linen, and the fishy aroma of the river, you'd have been socially exiled in no time. In short, you wouldn't survive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of the Nile, toes sinking slightly into the damp, cooling soil. The sun has slid low, spreading a pale orange wash over the water's surface, and far in the distance you hear the creak of oarlocks. A boat drifts past, its crew singing in a language you don't know but feel you've heard in a dream. The scent in the air is not just river water, it's a whisper of something floral, spicy, maybe even sweet. You glance down and notice the faint sheen left on the surface as a clay jar tips overboard, releasing a swirl of shimmering oil into the current. The Nile was never a quiet place. At every bend there's a murmur: women washing linen, men hauling papyrus reeds, fishermen calling to each other. Yet tonight you sense something more intentional, like the river itself is carrying a message. And in a way it is. Along these waters travel not only grain and wine, but fragrances born from faraway hillsides, forest sap, and blossoms that never saw Egyptian soil. They came from Punt, from Nubia, from lands you can barely imagine without a map. Step back from the water now, feel the grainy grit of sand clinging to your heels, and you'll find yourself at the start of a narrow path leading away from the shore. The smell intensifies. Somewhere inland, merchants are unpacking crates and jars still warm from the sun of their journey. You pass a group of boys splashing each other, laughing in a way that makes you forget for a second that you're a guest here, a stranger in another millennium. One of them carries a small bundle wrapped in palm leaves. When he stumbles and drops it, the leaves loosen, and a puff of resinous sweetness escapes. It's gone in an instant, swallowed by the breeze, but you know you'll remember that smell. Egyptian men, especially in these bustling river towns, wore fragrance like armor. Not in the modern spritz-on-your-neck-and-go sense, but as a constant layer, worked into their hair with scented oils, pressed into linen collars, even dabbed on wrists before stepping into public. You can't help but think of it like the cologne aisle in a department store, except here, each drop had to be fought for, traded for, or brought in on the back of a camel from across the desert. It wasn't luxury. It was identity. The river path opens onto a small dock, where a few traders stand in the lamplight, their silhouettes sharp against the darkening sky. They speak in low voices, but every so often one will laugh and slap another's shoulder. As you draw closer, you catch sight of the jars, squat, rounded, each sealed with a lump of wax. One man pries a lid open with his dagger, and instantly, the night changes. The scent that rushes out is so rich it seems to wrap around your face, almost warm in its intensity. You catch a hint of cinnamon, though it's likely cassia, a note of honey, and underneath it all, a faint tang of myrrh. It's not the kind of smell you'd wear to hide body odor. It's the kind that announces you from across the courtyard. You realize, with a smile, that this might be the whole point. Some historians suggest men used these strong perfumes not merely to mask the less pleasant realities of ancient hygiene, but as a deliberate signal to potential lovers. In a crowd, you'd know instantly who was wealthy, who was worldly, who had the connections to bring this kind of scent into their orbit. Further up the bank, the night insects have started their chorus. The Nile reflects the stars now, as though the sky has bent low to listen. You breathe in deeply, holding the scent in your mind like a photograph you'll never be able to take. Somewhere in that blend of spice and flower, of resin and oil, is the story of a civilization, one you're about to follow deeper, past the city gates, into the very heart of Thebes. You're still carrying that faint trace of perfume in your nostrils as you approach the great gates of Thebes. They loom ahead, massive slabs of sandstone carved with images of gods so tall you have to tilt your head until your neck aches just to meet their eyes. The city walls catch the last embers of the sunset, and you notice how the warm stone almost glows, like it's holding on to the day for just a moment longer. The guards don't seem to mind you slipping in with a cluster of merchants. They're more interested in inspecting the cargo, clay jars, baskets of figs, bolts of linen, and tucked in the shadow of it all, bundles wrapped tightly in reed mats. From one of these, you catch a sudden burst of floral sweetness. Someone nearby, tall, dressed in linen pleated so sharp it could cut, is smiling in that "I know you smell it" kind of way. He's not selling, he's advertising without a word. Inside the walls, Thebes is alive. The sound hits you first: haggling voices, the low bray of a donkey, the slap of sandals on packed earth. But layered under it is the smell. Not one smell, but hundreds: fresh bread pulled from mud brick ovens, roasted duck turning slowly on a spit, the sharp tang of fermenting beer, and somewhere, threading through it all, that same seductive perfume. It doesn't overpower. It teases, appearing in waves when someone passes, vanishing before you can place it. You follow a side street that narrows until your elbows almost brush the walls. Lantern light glimmers on polished copper mirrors hung outside a workshop. Through the open doorway, you glimpse a man leaning over a jar, dipping a long reed into a thick, amber-colored oil. He brushes it carefully along the collar of his robe, then smooths the fabric with the kind of satisfaction that tells you he's preparing to be seen. Ancient Egyptian men, especially in a city like this, understood the performance of scent. It wasn't enough to simply be clean, clean was expected. Perfume was about projection, an invisible announcement of your arrival before your voice or face could make the introduction. And here's the fascinating part: some of those fragrances weren't even local. They came from frankincense trees in southern Arabia, cinnamon from lands so far away they were half myth, and resins from the deserts of Punt. Each drop was a tiny declaration of global connection. You pass a stall where a woman is selling small alabaster pots. Their lids are tied with twine, and she's letting customers lift them just enough to take in the scent. A young man does so, and his eyes widen before he fishes out more coins than you think he can afford. He dabs some oil along his wrists and neck, then pats the back of his head where his hair meets his linen headpiece. When he turns away, a faint cloud follows him, soft, musky, just sweet enough to linger. There's a theory, one the more romantic historians like to repeat, that perfume wasn't only about showing off wealth. It was about intimacy. In the crowded markets and tight courtyards of Thebes, personal space wasn't really a thing. A brush of an arm, a lean in to speak, it all brought you into the invisible halo of someone's scent. And when that scent was unique, unforgettable, it did the work of memory long after the person was gone. You're nudged along by the crowd toward the main square. The torches here are brighter, throwing flickers over the temple facade at the far end. Priests in white linen pass silently, their shaven heads gleaming. You catch a whiff of something stronger, richer, than what you've been smelling all evening. It's almost too much, like overstepping into a cloud of incense at full burn. The priests carry small burners, thin trails of smoke curling up into the night, as if marking the path to the gods themselves. Standing there, half lost in the perfume haze, you realize something. This city smells like ambition. Every man here seems to wear a scent that says, "Notice me. Remember me. Choose me." Whether it's for trade, status, or romance, the goal is the same, to be the one they talk about tomorrow. And as the warm air drifts over you, full of spice and flowers and heat, you can't help but think, some things haven't changed much in a few thousand years. The square is still alive when you slip into another narrow lane. Somewhere ahead, a laugh echoes, deep, confident, and followed by the clink of pottery lids being lifted. You follow it, drawn toward the source, and into the heart of Thebes where the real treasures are kept. You trail that laughter down winding alleys, stepping over uneven stones, brushing past woven curtains that hang across archways like half-closed eyelids. Thebes after sundown isn't chaotic, it's curious. You're drawn deeper into its pulse, and soon the walls part again to reveal a small courtyard lit by oil lamps and scalloped niches. In the center sits a low wooden table, and around it, a group of men lean in, chuckling between sips of date wine and gestures both grand and theatrical. But what really catches your attention isn't the laughter, it's the jars. They're everywhere. Short, stout, amphora-like things with narrow necks sealed in clay and linen. They're stacked in pyramids along the back wall and tucked beneath benches. One of them, larger, darker than the rest, rests in the lap of a man with henna-tinted hands. He's peeling back the wax seal with such care, like he's holding a relic rather than a bottle of oil. And in a way, he is. These aren't your average scents. These are treasures. Inside each jar is a carefully blended perfume made from resins, flower petals, animal fats, and oils pressed by hand. But it's not just the ingredients that make them special, it's what's written on the outside. Scratched into the clay, with almost devotional precision, are hieroglyphs. The name of the maker, the season it was sealed, and even the type of fragrance it holds. Warm oil of Punt, one reads. Blossom wind of Batet, says another. You move closer, watching as a merchant offers a dab of golden oil to the underside of a nobleman's wrist. The nobleman closes his eyes, breathes in slowly, and then he smiles. The kind of smile that says, yes, this is the one. It turns out that scent was a kind of silent conversation in Egypt. Different perfumes had different purposes. Some were strictly for temple rituals. Some were for mourning. But others were flirtation in a bottle. If you wore Sacred Lily on a market day, you weren't just going grocery shopping, you were making a statement. And if you chose a rich blend of lotus and cinnamon bark for the palace banquet, well, let's just say people would be looking twice. You spot a boy crouched by the table, grinding something with a stone pestle. He looks up just long enough to notice you watching, then goes back to work. The mash in the bowl is red-purple, glistening. Crushed hibiscus? Maybe rose petals? Hard to say. But the smell wafting up is bright, citrusy, almost playful, like a wink hidden in a cloud of incense. Nearby, a young man is applying oil to his hair. He works slowly, massaging it in from root to tip until each strand is slick and dark. You remember reading that some Egyptian men wore cones of scented wax atop their heads at formal events. Over the course of an evening, body heat would melt the cone, letting the fragrance drip down into their wigs and robes like the world's fanciest slow-release diffuser. Historians still debate how widespread the practice really was, whether it was symbolic or literal. But you can't deny it sounds kind of genius. A little weird. But genius. There's a sudden gust of wind, and it lifts the sense of the courtyard like a wave crashing over you. You smell sweetness, sharpness, something a little bitter, and something else, so soft and airy it reminds you of standing in the detergent aisle of a modern supermarket, if that aisle had been blessed by Hathor herself. Someone next to you mumbles, "Too much myrrh," and you blink. It's an older man, eyes half-lidded, fanning himself lazily. He leans in and whispers, "The trick is balance. A bit of wood, a touch of flower. And never too much oil, it clings like guilt." You want to laugh, but he's not wrong. The best perfumers were alchemists. They knew how to blend base notes with top notes, how to layer scent so that it unfolded slowly, like a story whispered in your ear over the course of an evening. And they didn't just experiment for fun. The recipes were passed down, guarded, and sometimes even buried with their creators. There's one little-known fact that might surprise you. Some of the most valuable perfume oils in Egypt weren't made from flowers or spices at all, but from animal glands. That's right. Certain musks were extracted from civets or other wild creatures, prized for their ability to anchor lighter scents and make them last longer. It's not something you see advertised on modern cologne bottles, but let's be honest. Now with bonus civet sweat, doesn't really sell. You make your way around the courtyard, each step taking you closer to a wall lined with tall, narrow shelves. They hold rows of tiny pots, each with a piece of cloth tied around the lid like a bonnet. These are the test jars. You open one, and it's like sticking your face into a bouquet dipped in molasses. Another smells faintly of smoked cedar, and honeyed figs. A third gives off something dry and earthy, like crushed pine needles and old paper. Even in a place where most people didn't bathe daily, because, well, desert, Egyptians were obsessed with smelling good. Sweat? Natural. Funk? Understandable. But perfume? That was the equalizer. Rich or poor, if you could get your hands on even a drop, you'd use it. There are records of workers being paid partly in scent oils. Imagine that. Here's your barley ration, your loaf of bread, and a vial of sunset blossom. See you Monday. And the funny thing is, no one really agrees why perfume became so vital to Egyptian men in particular. Some scholars argue it was about class. Only the elite could afford the good stuff. Others say it had to do with spiritual purity, since scent was tied to the gods. And then there's the theory you like best, that it was a tool for attraction. A flex. A fragrant flirt. A way of saying, yes, I'm single, and yes, I smell better than your cousin Nefer's fiancé. You lean back against a cool stone wall, letting it all soak in, the laughter, the soft rise and fall of voices, the candlelight dancing across perfumed faces. It's not just a marketplace. It's a performance. And you haven't even seen the main event yet. The air gets warmer as you leave the courtyard and follow a twisting lane toward a cluster of lights ahead. There's a hum in the distance, low voices, a ripple of music, and that faint, rhythmic thump of hand drums. The smell hits you before the sight does: roasted meats, honeyed bread, a curl of incense, and underneath it all, the heady sweetness of perfume so thick you could almost taste it. Then the alley bursts open into a grand courtyard draped in linen banners, their edges fluttering in the evening breeze. Torches line the walls, throwing molten gold across the faces of servants gliding between tables, trays balanced effortlessly on their palms. You've stumbled straight into a banquet. Not a quiet, polite dinner, no, this is a spectacle. Men in crisp, pleated linen tunics stand in animated clusters, gesturing wildly as they speak. Women in flowing gowns lean back on cushioned couches, their laughter sharp and bright. Every head glistens in the firelight, oiled hair catching the glow like polished obsidian. And every single person seems to carry their own private scent bubble, spicy here, floral there, a whiff of something smoky as a man brushes past you toward the wine. You drift along the edges, watching how the scents mingle. Some men are careful, just enough fragrance to invite someone closer. Others have gone all in, practically radiating waves of lotus, cinnamon, or resin. You can't help but imagine the ancient equivalent of someone bathing in cologne before a date, the kind of guy whose smell announces him a good 30 seconds before he actually walks in. A servant approaches with a small alabaster bowl, steam curling from the liquid inside. He offers it, and you take a cautious sniff. It's a spiced wine, laced with what smells suspiciously like frankincense. You take a sip, and the warmth spreads instantly, both from the alcohol and the fragrant oil slick on the surface. You realize this isn't just for taste. The drink leaves a faint trace of scent on your lips, like you've been wearing perfume without even trying. Across the courtyard, a group gathers near a low stage where musicians pluck strings and tap tambourines. A dancer steps into the light, her arms fluid, her ankles wrapped in tiny bells. She spins, and as she passes, a rush of perfume follows, thicker, richer than anything you've smelled tonight. It clings to the air like smoke from a fire. She's wearing a scented wax cone atop her braided wig, the tip already melting under the heat of the torches. Drops of perfumed oil run down, catching the lamplight as they vanish into her hair. You spot a man leaning against a column, eyes following the dancer with a knowing smile. He's wearing a broad collar of turquoise and gold, and his tunic is spotless despite the heat. He shifts slightly, and the movement sends a puff of scent your way, deep, resinous, almost animal. This is no cheap blend. It's the kind of perfume that says I have connections to places you've only heard of in stories. Here's the fun part. Ancient banquets like this were perfect hunting grounds for would-be lovers. The wine flowed, the music swelled, and the perfumes did half the talking. A man could cross the room, offer a cup, and let his scent do the rest. If the recipient leaned in instead of away, that was all the signal he needed. There's one particularly odd historical tidbit. In some circles, it was considered polite, flirty even, to share perfume mid-party. A man might hand a small vial to someone he was interested in, letting them dab a little on their own wrists. Imagine passing someone a spritz of your cologne at a modern bar, subtle, but unmistakable. The drums pick up, and so does the chatter. You notice how often people lean in close, speaking just near the ear. They're not shouting over the noise, they're letting the perfume fill the tiny space between them. Some scents are bold enough to be conversation starters all on their own. A servant passes carrying a tray stacked with small cakes dusted in what looks like cinnamon. You take one, bite into the soft, sweet crumb, and realize the spice is more than flavor, it's fragrance, too. Even food here is a carrier for scent, designed to weave into the night's atmosphere. Somewhere near the back, you hear a burst of laughter. A young man in a bright white tunic has just spilled a little too much oil onto his hands, and now he's holding them out awkwardly, as if they're dangerous. His friends are teasing him, waving their own scented wrists like a mock competition. You catch a few words, something about smelling like an entire market stall. Still, you can't help but think, for all the excess, all the layers of scent and flavor and music, there's something intimate here. The banquet isn't just a feast for the stomach, it's a playground for the senses. And in the middle of it all, perfume reigns. It's as much a participant as the guests themselves, drifting and mingling, whispering in its own language. You linger until the music softens, the dancers slow, and the torches start to burn lower. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a new smell rises, fresher, sharper, tinged with the green bite of plants. The wind shifts, and you know there's another story waiting just beyond these walls. The air changes the moment you step away from the banquet courtyard. It's still warm, but now there's a freshness to it, a sweetness that doesn't cling like incense or roasted meat. You follow the scent through a quieter street where the sound of music fades behind you, replaced by the soft creak of wooden shutters and the distant rustle of palm fronds. Ahead, a row of small shops huddles under a canopy of woven reeds. Their owners are just beginning to close up for the night, but one stall remains stubbornly open. It's lit not by torches, but by a cluster of clay oil lamps, their flames steady in the still air. The man behind the counter is pouring something thick and amber into a tiny alabaster jar, his hands as steady as a priest's during a ritual. When he glances up, his smile is quick, but his eyes linger, like he's sizing you up. He gestures you closer, lifts the jar to your face, and lets you inhale. The smell is rich and sweet, but not in the cloying way of the banquet perfumes. This is subtler. You catch the tang of resin, the warmth of honey, and there it is, a soft, earthy note that feels almost like crushed leaves in sunlight. Myrrh, he says, as if that explains everything. And in a way it does. Myrrh wasn't just any resin. It was one of the most treasured substances in ancient Egypt, harvested from the sap of thorny trees in faraway deserts. Traders risked weeks, sometimes months, crossing dangerous routes to bring it here. And when it arrived, it was used for everything from temple incense to embalming fluid. But tonight in this quiet street, it's something else entirely, an aphrodisiac. You watch as a younger man steps up beside you, coins clinking in his hand. He nods toward the merchant, who dips a thin reed into the jar and brushes the oil along the inside of the man's wrist. The man rubs his wrists together, then presses them lightly to the base of his throat. The transformation is instant. He stands straighter, his smile turns knowing. Without a word, he disappears into the shadows, leaving only the faint ghost of myrrh in his wake. Some historians will tell you this use of myrrh was less about seduction and more about status. But others, and you suspect they might be right, argue that its earthy, warm scent carried a kind of human intimacy, a closeness that went beyond wealth or piety. It wasn't the perfume you wore to impress an entire room. It was the one you wore for the person sitting beside you. The merchant leans in conspiratorially. Too much, and you'll smell like a funeral, he says with a half-smile. Too little, and you may as well wear nothing at all. It's a delicate balance. Myrrh is powerful. It clings to fabric, to skin, even to the air itself. The right amount might linger for hours after you've left, like the echo of a whispered conversation. The wrong amount? Well, let's just say it might linger for days, and not in the way you'd want. You thank him and step back into the street, the scent still clinging faintly to your own fingers from when you handled the jar. As you walk, you notice how different it feels from the banquet's layered chaos. This is a solitary perfume, one that invites someone to lean in close. At the end of the street, a pair of lovers passes you, their hands brushing just enough to touch. The man's scent, yes, unmistakably myrrh, drifts behind them, leaving you to wonder if the merchant's jars have already played a role in whatever story is unfolding there. You can't help but smile. In a city as vast and loud as Thebes, maybe it's the quiet perfumes, the ones you don't smell until you're near enough to feel someone's breath, that matter most. The wind shifts again, and now another scent rises, lighter, almost playful. It's not resin or spice this time. No, this is something fresh, like petals under morning sun. You follow it, knowing it will lead you somewhere new, somewhere where fragrance is born before it's bottled. The scent draws you out of the lamplit streets, and into the softer hush of dawn. You've walked through the night without realizing it, and now the sky over Thebes is paling from deep violet to the first blush of gold. The air feels cooler, cleaner, and the noise of the city has shifted, fewer voices, more of the soft thud of baskets being set down, the low calls of early risers. You've reached the morning market. But this isn't the kind of market where grain sacks tower over your head or butchers wave you in with hooks. This one is narrower, calmer, each stall dedicated to something that smells better than the last. Here, perfume isn't just sold, it's staged. The first stall you pass is draped in fresh linen to shield its goods from the sun. Rows of little clay flasks sit neatly in shallow trays of cool sand, their surfaces painted with lotus flowers, lilies, and papyrus stalks. The vendor, a wiry man with skin like polished bronze, offers you one to sniff. The stopper is just a wad of waxed linen, and as soon as you loosen it, a bright, watery sweetness escapes. Lotus. Freshly pressed into oil not a week ago. It smells like the Nile at sunrise, gentle and alive. You wander further, weaving between clusters of shoppers. Men in crisp white kilts bargain with traders over tiny pots of unguent. Women trail thin scarves through shallow bowls of oil to scent them before draping them back over their shoulders. There's laughter here, but it's not loud, more like the murmured kind exchanged over a shared secret. One stall stops you in your tracks. It's piled high with spices in open baskets, each mound a different shade, crimson, ochre, deep green. The merchant invites you closer, pinching a bit of fine powder between his fingers before letting it fall into a shallow dish of warm oil. The moment it touches, the scent blooms, cinnamon, cardamom, and something sharp, almost peppery. He dips a reed stick into the mixture, offers it for you to smell. This, he says proudly, is for the bold ones. You can see why. It's not shy, it's a scent that would follow you through a crowd like a shadow. The market is alive with these tiny performances. Vendors break open pods of aromatic seeds so customers can inhale their freshness. They slice strips of resin from golden lumps, letting the sharp sweet fragrance curl upward into the air. And all the while, coins change hands, goods are wrapped in palm leaves, and deals are sealed with smiles. What's striking is how democratic this place feels. At the banquet, perfumes were a currency of status. Here, they're an everyday indulgence. Even a farmer with a few extra copper deben can leave with a vial of oil that will make him smell like the gardens of a palace. In some cases, scent oils were sold diluted so more people could afford them, less potent, yes, but still carrying enough fragrance to matter. You pause near a young man who's inspecting a pot of unguent. The vendor leans in, whispering something that makes him chuckle, and you catch a phrase about turning heads. The young man nods, tucks the pot into his pouch, and strides away with the kind of confidence you don't get from clean clothes alone. Not far from the stalls, an incense brazier smolders, sending tendrils of perfumed smoke drifting through the market. It's part advertising, part atmosphere, the scent guiding shoppers from one end to the other like an invisible path. You notice a woman dabbing oil along her forearms, then brushing the rest into her hair before disappearing into the crowd. The movement is so casual, but you can see how it leaves a fragrant trail in her wake. Somewhere nearby, a group of children chase each other around the stalls, laughing and shrieking. One of them carries a small pouch of something that spills as he runs, releasing bursts of dried petals into the air. The scent is faint but sweet, like the memory of a perfume long faded from the skin. As you step away from the market, your fingers are slick from the oils you've sampled, each one telling a different story. Resin and spice, flower and root, they all seem to blend together in the warm morning air. But you can feel another current pulling you onward. There's talk of someone in the city, a master of scent, whose creations are unlike anything found in the market stalls. The kind of blends that could make a stranger turn to look for you long after you've gone. And if the whispers are true, you might be able to see him at work. You follow the whispers through narrow lanes where the stone walls rise high enough to trap the cool shade. The city is waking fully now. The air ripples with the clang of bronze tools, the clip of donkey hooves, the murmur of voices moving toward the day's work. But there's a thread of scent guiding you, sharper than the market's bright flowers, richer than the banquet's heavy oils. It's like being pulled along by an invisible ribbon. The trail ends at an unmarked doorway set into the side of a mud brick building. The wood is dark with age, polished smooth where countless hands have pushed it open. You step inside, and the temperature shifts instantly. The room is cool, the light dim, broken only by shafts of gold spilling through narrow slits high in the wall. At the center, seated cross-legged on a reed mat, is the man you've come to find. His hair is bound back with a strip of linen, his arms bare and dusted with fine powder. Around him, in a perfect circle, sits his kingdom: clay jars, alabaster pots, baskets of petals, mounds of resin like chunks of amber torn from the sun itself. He looks up, smiles faintly, and gestures for you to sit. "You want to know what perfume really is," he says, his voice low and even. "You start here." He takes a handful of white lotus petals from a shallow tray and crushes them gently between his palms. The air between you blooms with their watery sweetness, delicate and fleeting. "This," he says, "is the spirit. But it's too shy to last alone." Next, he reaches for a lump of dark, glossy resin, myrrh, by the smell of it. He shaves off a curl with a bronze knife and drops it into a small mortar already lined with oil. "This," he continues, "is the memory. It stays. It reminds." He works in silence for a while, grinding the resin into the oil until it darkens and thickens. You watch his hands, steady, precise, almost reverent. The smell grows stronger, wrapping around you in layers, the bright first note of lotus, the deep bass of myrrh, and something else, something peppery, like a faint spark at the back of your throat. "Cinnamon bark," he says, catching your expression. "From far away. A trader brought it last month. Expensive, but it sings." He pours the blend into a small jar and seals it with a square of linen tied with twine. Then he leans closer. "Perfume," he says, "isn't about the nose. It's about the story. You wear it so someone remembers you when you're gone. You wear it so you can walk into a room twice, once in body, once in scent. On a low shelf behind him sits a row of tiny amphorae, each labeled with a symbol rather than a name. He points to one, shaped like a droplet. That one, he says, is for lovers. Just a little on the wrists, and they'll remember you all night. Too much, and they'll remember you for the wrong reasons. You notice a block of scented wax in the corner, pale and smooth, with the imprint of a hand pressed into it. He sees you looking. That's for the head cones, he explains. The wax melts slowly in the heat, and the oil runs down into the hair. At a feast, it makes you smell alive even when the food is gone and the music is fading. Historians still debate whether those wax cones were everyday fashion or just artistic embellishment in paintings. He shrugs at the question. If it works, who cares? Before you leave, he offers you a thin reed dipped in one of his blends. The scent is unlike anything you've tried so far, sweet at first, then smoky, then settling into a soft, powdery warmth that feels almost like the memory of sun on stone. You'll carry it for hours, he says simply. That's the point. You step back into the street, the heat catching you immediately after the cool stillness of his workshop. And just as he promised, the perfume follows you, like a shadow made of air, leading you toward the next part of this city's fragrant story. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, the desert waits, and with it, the origins of scents that have traveled farther than the Nile itself. The road out of Thebes narrows until it's little more than a path worn into the earth, flanked by low mud brick walls and the occasional palm. Beyond the last cluster of houses, the landscape opens wide, the Nile curling behind you like a silver ribbon, the desert stretching ahead in waves of pale gold. The scent of the city fades slowly, replaced by the clean dryness of wind and dust. But then, just at the edge of your awareness, there's something new, a warm, resinous aroma riding the breeze. You're not alone on this path. A small caravan moves ahead of you, 4 camels in single file, each swaying gently under the weight of reed baskets. The traders walk alongside, wrapped in linen against the sun, their faces hidden but for their eyes. One of them turns back briefly and nods to you, as if to say keep pace. You do. The smell grows richer as the sun climbs. You realize it's coming from the cargo itself, bundles of resin, some wrapped tight in palm leaves, others open to the air. A trader notices your curiosity and grins. From Punt, he says. 2 weeks in the desert. He pats the nearest camel's flank. Smells like it now. Punt. The name alone carries weight here. It's a place of legend, lush where Egypt is dry, the source of frankincense, myrrh, and other treasures you can't find in the Nile Valley. Expeditions to Punt were recorded with the same pride as military victories, complete with carvings of ships heavy with goods and rows of foreign trees brought back to be planted in temple gardens. You imagine the journey, days of nothing but sand and heat, the air shimmering so fiercely you can't tell where the ground ends and the sky begins. The camels plod forward, their loads fragrant enough to announce them long before they reach any settlement. One of the traders hands you a lump of frankincense the size of a figure. It's smooth in places, rough in others, and when you warm it between your palms, the scent bursts out, sweet, sharp, almost lemony. Good for the gods, he says. And for women. You don't ask which order he means. Historians still argue about whether these desert scents were valued more for their spiritual uses or their sensual ones. In temples, they were burned to please the gods, the smoke rising like a bridge between worlds. But in homes, the same resins were ground, mixed with oils, and worn on the skin. Maybe the truth is that both uses fed the same hunger, the desire to be noticed, by divinity, or by someone sitting across from you at a feast. By midday, the caravan stops at a cluster of stone outcrops offering a patch of shade. The camels kneel, baskets creaking, and the traders unpack flatbread, dates, and skins of water. One of them breaks a small piece of resin and tosses it into a clay brazier. The air fills instantly with smoke so thick it curls into your clothes. The scent is intoxicating, sweet at first, then bitter, then warm again. You sit with them, watching how the smoke moves. It doesn't just rise, it clings, curling around each person like a living thing. A man beside you closes his eyes and inhales deeply, the kind of breath that seems to anchor him in place. You wonder if he's thinking of the market where he'll sell this resin, or of someone who will smell it on him later. When the sun dips low, you and the traders head back toward the city. The smell follows, less a trail than a promise. It will linger on their cargo, on their clothes, on anyone who brushes against them in the narrow streets of Thebes. And for those who know, one whiff will be enough to tell the whole story, where they've been, what they've carried, and just how far they've gone for something that can't be touched but can change everything. The city walls rise ahead, their gates open wide in the fading light. But this time, the scent that greets you isn't the chaos of the market or the heady mix of a banquet. It's something softer, sweeter, the smell of flowers carried on a garden breeze. And you realize, you're about to step into a place where the very air is curated like a work of art. The closer you get, the more the air feels intentional. It's not just that it smells good, it smells designed. The guards at the gate don't even glance at you as you step through, which is surprising considering this isn't a public entrance. On the other side, you find yourself in a walled paradise, the private gardens of a pharaoh. The noise of the city has vanished. Here, the world is made of water and green. Narrow canals cut through the garden in straight lines, feeding rows of papyrus, palm, and fruit trees heavy with figs and dates. The sound of running water is everywhere, small fountains, carved stone basins, even the soft splash of fish breaking the surface of a pond. But it's the smell that stops you. Lotus blossoms drift lazily across the pond, their petals luminous in the late sunlight. The scent is subtle but persistent, a watery sweetness that feels both fresh and ancient, like the Nile distilled into a single breath. Around the edges, clusters of jasmine climb trellises, releasing their perfume in bursts whenever the wind stirs. And beneath it all is the low hum of something richer, acacia wood smoldering in small braziers hidden among the shrubs, its smoke curling up in slow ribbons. You follow a winding path to a shaded pavilion, where a servant is crushing petals in a shallow bronze bowl. He works in silence, hands stained faintly green from the stems. The paste he makes will be pressed into oil for the pharaoh's household, oil that will scent their hair, their linens, even the cushions of their couches. This isn't perfume for public display. This is the scent of privacy, of luxury so complete it doesn't need an audience. Near the center of the garden, an open-air pool reflects the orange sky. Two women in linen dresses kneel at the water's edge, dipping wreaths of lotus into the pool. When they lift them, droplets slide down the petals, catching the light before falling back with tiny splashes. They laugh softly, exchanging the flowers as though passing a secret. You realize these wreaths will be worn in the evening, not for the street, but for someone waiting in a quieter room. The pharaoh's gardens were more than beauty projects, they were scent factories. Certain flowers were grown not for their looks but for their oils, with gardeners as meticulous as jewelers. Some plants were harvested before sunrise, when their fragrance was at its peak. Others were picked only after dusk, believed to capture the moon's gentler influence. It's hard not to be impressed, knowing that every breath you take here has been engineered by generations of expertise. You pause near a row of sycamore figs, their sweet smell mingling with the sharper green of nearby herbs. Basil, mint, coriander, they're here too, adding freshness to the air. A servant passes carrying a basket lined with palm leaves, the contents hidden, but the faint aroma of marjoram drifts behind him. Some historians still puzzle over the exact recipes used in royal perfumery. We have fragments, mentions of lily oil, myrrh, cinnamon, but the proportions, the order, the rituals are lost. Maybe that's why the gardens feel like a living mystery, each plant a word in a language only a few could ever truly speak. As the sun dips, lanterns are lit along the pathways, their lights soft and golden. Somewhere deep in the garden, a flute begins to play, slow, winding notes that curl through the air like smoke. You breathe in deeply, catching one last blend of lotus, jasmine, and smoldering acacia. When you leave through the far gate, the scents cling to you like an invisible cloak. You know they'll fade eventually, lotus first, then jasmine, then the lingering shadow of wood smoke. But for now, you carry the garden with you. And beyond the gate, the city's night air is waiting, heavier and bolder, smelling faintly of ambition. In the distance, laughter rises again, and with it, the unmistakable pull of fragrance used not for beauty, but for power. The sound of laughter grows sharper as you follow the lantern-lit street toward the palace quarter. The air here feels heavier, as if the night itself has been perfumed. It's not the shy sweetness of the pharaoh's gardens, this is thicker, denser, an aroma that refuses to be ignored. A pair of men stride past you in crisp linen kilts, their hair gleaming under a coating of scented oil. The scent that follows them is layered, first a sharp note, like crushed coriander seeds, then a deep resin that sticks in your throat. It's the olfactory equivalent of a gold seal on a letter, unmistakable and impossible to fake. In ancient Egypt, perfume wasn't just an accessory, it was a political statement. The fragrance you wore told people where you stood in the social order. Certain blends were so closely associated with wealth and authority that wearing them without rank could be seen as audacious or dangerous. You pass under a carved lintel into a wide courtyard filled with men in high collars and jewel-encrusted pectorals. A brazier at the center burns thick coils of kifi, a temple blend of honey, raisins, wine, and 15 or more other ingredients, all simmered down into a paste and rolled into incense balls. The smoke drapes over the courtyard like a curtain, tinting everything in shades of amber. A man near the brazier is speaking in low tones to a group of younger officials. As he gestures, you catch his scent, woody and dark, with a hint of something medicinal. This is not the kind of perfume you'd wear to attract a lover. It's the kind you wear when you want people to listen, to pause before speaking. You imagine it lingering in council halls long after the man himself has left. Historians have long debated whether Egyptian officials deliberately chose heavier, more complex fragrances to signal gravitas. Some point to temple inscriptions that link certain scents to divine authority. Others believe it was simply a matter of wealth. The rarer the ingredient, the more power it implied. Whatever the truth, you can feel it here. The air itself seems to lean toward those who wear these scents. A servant appears at your side, offering a small ivory box. Inside are rolls of linen soaked in perfumed oil, tightly bound and kept cool in the shade. For the guests, he murmurs. You take one, pressing it briefly to your skin, and the aroma blooms, sweet at first, then rich and leathery. The weight of it feels almost ceremonial. Not far from you, two men in similar attire approach each other with measured steps. Instead of bowing, they extend their wrists for the briefest moment, letting each take in the other's scent. It's a greeting, yes, but also a subtle game. Each blend says something about the wearer, their connections, their travels, their access to rare imports. One man smiles faintly, as if conceding the other has the upper hand tonight. There's a moment when you catch a lighter, almost playful fragrance cutting through the heavier air, a thread of lotus and honey. You follow it and find a younger man standing alone at the edge of the courtyard, his gaze sweeping the crowd. His perfume is calculated, sweet enough to be inviting, but anchored with a whisper of cedar that keeps it from being frivolous. He meets your eyes briefly, and you understand. This is a scent designed for diplomacy, for making allies without making enemies. The brazier smokes on, and the conversation flows in waves, but you start to notice something else. The air is thickening. The longer you stay, the more every scent starts to merge into one continuous cloud. This is the power of perfume at its most strategic. It's not about one person standing out. It's about creating an atmosphere in which you can't separate the individuals from the collective authority they represent. As you slip back toward the street, the cooler night air feels almost shocking in its clarity. The city beyond is noisier, less controlled. Somewhere, you hear the rise and fall of voices in a side alley, quieter, more intimate, and laced with a different kind of tension. Not the scent of power, but of secrets. The main streets fade behind you, replaced by narrow alleys where the light thins and the air grows cooler. Here, perfume doesn't arrive in grand clouds. It slips out like a whisper, curling from shadowed doorways and quiet corners. You follow one such trail, faint, almost evasive, until you reach a courtyard hidden behind a wooden gate. It's small, enclosed, with low walls covered in climbing vines. A single oil lamp glows on a table, casting the kind of light that hides as much as it reveals. Two figures sit close together, their voices hushed. You linger at the edge, not intruding, but close enough to notice the scent that hangs between them. It's unlike anything you've smelled in the markets or banquets. There's a dark sweetness to it, almost like overripe fruit, balanced by a sharp green note that cuts through before it can grow too heavy. It feels dangerous in its precision. One of them leans forward, and you catch a scrap of conversation. Only for the Queen's inner circle. You realize they're speaking about the perfume itself. A blend not sold, not traded, but gifted in secrecy, meant for the kind of encounters that never appear in public records. Some historians call these forbidden scents, not because they were outlawed, but because their rarity and association with certain individuals made them too bold for general use. If someone caught a whiff of this blend in the street, they might not just notice, they might draw conclusions. Dangerous ones. The man at the table reaches into a small chest and removes a narrow alabaster vial, its surface etched with a symbol you don't recognize. He tips a drop onto the inside of the woman's wrist. She closes her eyes as he leans in, close enough that you can almost feel the warmth pass between them. For a moment, the air thickens, and even from here you understand, this isn't a perfume for attracting just anyone. It's for binding a memory to a specific person. The woman laughs softly, but it's not the kind of laughter you'd hear in the banquet halls. It's low, private, edged with something conspiratorial. She slips the vial into the folds of her robe before they both stand and vanish into a side passage, leaving only the lamp and the lingering trace of that scent. You stay there a moment longer, breathing it in. There's something almost magnetic about the forbidden. Knowing this perfume is meant to be hidden makes it feel stronger, more vivid. It's the kind of scent that could cling to someone's imagination for years, maybe decades. The lamp flickers, and a cool draft carries the smell away, replacing it with the drier air of the empty courtyard. You turn back toward the street, thinking of all the perfumes you've encountered so far, some for power, some for beauty, and now, some for secrets. And yet there's still another layer you haven't touched, the sense woven into rituals, where fragrance was meant to bridge the gap between the living and the divine. Those smells weren't about seduction or politics. They were about eternity. The street narrows again before opening into a space you didn't expect, an open courtyard just outside a temple wall. It's not the polished marble grandeur you've seen in the palace district. This is older, darker, its sandstone blocks warmed by centuries of sun. A few priests in plain white linen move quietly between altars, carrying small bronze censers from which thin ribbons of smoke drift upward. The air here is heavier, layered in a way that feels different from the perfumes of the city. This scent doesn't flirt, it commands. You catch resin immediately, rich and almost bitter, but beneath it is something sweeter, like dried figs or honey boiled into syrup. And under that, a sharp green bite, maybe juniper or mint. The combination is dizzying, not unpleasant, but powerful in a way that makes you instinctively slow your breathing. A priest passes near you, his shaved head gleaming in the torchlight. In one hand he holds a small pouch of crushed petals and herbs, in the other a carved box filled with resinous chunks the color of amber and tar. He stops at a low altar, adds a piece to the smoldering coals, and the air blooms with smoke so fragrant it almost feels tangible. Kifi. You've heard the word whispered in markets and among traders, but here it's not a commodity, it's a prayer. This incense is made in a process so elaborate that even the smallest mistake could ruin a batch. Some recipes call for more than a dozen ingredients: frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, mastic, raisins, wine, honey, and others you can't name from scent alone. The priests grind each separately, mix them at precise times of day, and chant as they blend, believing the fragrance will carry their words to the gods. One of them notices you watching and beckons you closer. He gestures for you to cup your hands over the smoke and draw it toward your face. The heat is gentle, the scent overwhelming. For a moment, it's as if the entire night has been distilled into this one breath, sweet, resinous, deep, and strangely soothing. Perfume for the living, the priest says softly, is for the skin. Perfume for the gods is for the soul. You remember reading that Kifi wasn't only burned in temples. Some Egyptians used diluted versions as a nighttime drink, believing it could ease dreams and cleanse the spirit. Others rubbed it into their clothes so the scent would follow them like a blessing, or a shield. And some believed certain blends could protect the dead on their journey to the afterlife, guiding them through dangers unseen. Historians still argue about whether these rituals were purely symbolic or if the ingredients had real medicinal effects. But here in this smoke, it hardly matters. The scent feels ancient, purposeful, and utterly unlike the playful or seductive blends you've encountered before. This is perfume stripped of vanity, yet still deeply human. A bell chimes somewhere inside the temple, low and resonant. The priests begin to move in a slow procession, their censers swinging gently, trailing smoke that winds through the air like silver threads. You follow at a respectful distance, each step pulling you deeper into the rhythm of the ritual. When the procession turns and vanishes into the temple's interior, the courtyard is left quiet again. The air is still thick with Kifi, but now it mingles with the faintest hint of something else, laughter, distant and muted, from a nearby side street. It's not the laughter of power or secrecy. It's lighter, sharper, teasing. And you realize you're about to walk into a space where perfume returns to its most human role, the art of attraction. You follow the sound of that laughter away from the temple's solemn stillness, down a side street where torchlight flickers unevenly against plastered walls. The air changes with each step, the sharp bite of kiffy giving way to something warmer, almost playful. By the time you reach the end of the alley, the scent is impossible to ignore, a bright floral top note, like crushed rose petals, layered over a base of something dark and resinous. The street opens into a small square, more of a gathering place than a market. Here, people move differently, slower, more deliberate. You notice how often their paths cross, how their eyes linger on each other just a beat too long. Perfume isn't an accessory here, it's a weapon, invisible but potent. At the center of the square, a group of men sit around a low table, each holding a small alabaster jar. They're laughing as they dip thin reeds into the oil and brush it along their throats, the inside of their wrists, even behind their ears. Across from them, a group of women recline on woven mats, their shoulders bare, their hair gleaming under the light of oil lamps. Every now and then, one will tilt her head slightly, as if testing the air. You catch a snippet of conversation, something about lotus for the gentle, cinnamon for the bold. It's a kind of game, it seems. The men choose their scents carefully, then move through the square in slow, easy arcs, letting the women catch the faintest trace before deciding whether to engage. No words, no grand gestures, just the passing of scent from one person to another like a whispered promise. You lean against a column and watch the dance unfold. One man, wearing a blend heavy with myrrh, walks past a woman who doesn't even glance at him. But moments later, another man passes with a sharper, spicier scent, and she turns her head almost imperceptibly. He catches it, stops, and without speaking, offers her his wrist. She leans in, inhales, and smiles. That's it. That's the signal. Historians still debate how much of this was conscious strategy, and how much was cultural instinct. Did Egyptians think of perfume the way we think of body language, an unspoken language anyone could learn? Or was it something deeper, a shared understanding passed down through generations, so natural no one questioned it? You notice one particularly striking scene. A young man, clearly nervous, dabs oil into his hairline, then steps forward to join the flow of movement. His scent is light, almost too subtle, but when he passes a certain woman, she stops talking mid-sentence. He doesn't see it, he's already moved on, but you watch her eyes follow him. The night grows thicker, warmer. Conversations get quieter, closer. Some pairs drift into the darker edges of the square, where the air feels cooler but the scents cling more stubbornly. You catch glimpses of hands brushing against linen, of shoulders leaning in close. Perfume is doing the work, and everyone here knows it. It makes you think back to the banquet, the markets, even the temple. There, fragrance had been about identity, wealth, piety. Here, it's distilled to its most primal function, to draw someone closer, to hold their attention in a crowd, to leave a trace on their memory that no amount of distance can wash away. As the lamps burn lower, the crowd thins, and the game begins to dissolve. The last of the laughter fades into the night, replaced by the quieter sound of footsteps heading home. But there's still one more part of the city to see, where scent isn't just a tool for pleasure or politics, but a mystery even the most careful historians can't quite untangle. The square empties behind you, but its scents linger, faint tendrils of lotus, myrrh, and spice curling in the night air like the last threads of a dream. You follow a narrow lane, your sandals brushing against the packed earth, until the sounds of the city flatten into a quiet hum. Ahead, a small building squats between taller walls, its doorway framed by two stone jackals. Inside, it smells older than the air outside, dust and resin, parchment and candle wax. The light is dim, provided by a single oil lamp set on a wide table. Across the table sits a man in a long, worn robe, his head bent over what looks like a sheet of papyrus. He doesn't look up when you enter. The walls around him are lined with shelves stacked high with scrolls, tablets, and wooden boxes. Some are labeled with neat hieroglyphs, others are left bare, as if their contents are meant to be secret. You take a cautious step closer, and that's when the scent reaches you, faint, dry, and somehow intellectual. Not floral or sweet, but like wood polished with oil, like ink made from crushed plants. The man finally looks up, his eyes sharp despite the softness of his voice. "You want to know why they wore it?" he says, not as a question but as a fact. "Why Egyptian men covered themselves in scent." He gestures for you to sit, and as you do, he unrolls the papyrus in front of him. The script is old, even by his standards. Some say it was to hide the smell of the Nile, or of sweat in the desert heat. Some say it was to show wealth, or to please the gods. But, he pauses, running a fingertip along the inked symbols, I think they feared being forgotten. You listen as he explains. In this ancient world, memory was fragile. To be remembered was to live, to be forgotten was to vanish entirely. Perfume, especially a distinctive one, was a way of imprinting yourself on someone's senses so powerfully that even after you'd gone, they would carry part of you with them. He tells you of a fragment found in an old tomb, a small alabaster jar still faintly fragrant after centuries sealed in darkness. No name was inscribed on it, no clue to its owner, yet the scent was enough to stir something in those who found it. The man it belonged to, the scribe says, is gone. But when you open that jar, you breathe the same air he once carried on his skin. You glance at the shelves again. Some boxes bear marks you recognize from perfume jars you've seen in the markets and banquets. The scribe sees you looking and smiles faintly. Yes. Recipes. Descriptions. Even disputes. Do you know how many scrolls I have where scribes argue over whether cinnamon belongs in a lover's blend or a temple one? They never agree. It's true, historians still can't settle some of these debates. Did certain scents carry fixed meanings, or did their interpretations shift over time? Was myrrh always a signal of intimacy, or could it just as easily mark mourning? The ambiguity lingers like a ghost in the record, teasing modern curiosity. The scribe leans back, the lamp casting deep lines across his face. Perhaps, he says, it is better that we do not know everything. Mystery gives a scent its life. Once you explain it, it becomes just oil and flowers. His words settle over you as you stand to leave. Outside, the night is cooler, and the city's smells have thinned. The Nile glints faintly in the distance, its surface carrying the last reflections of the moon. You realize there's only one place left to go, to return to the river where this journey began, to watch the day end as it always has, and to let the last of the city's perfumes drift away on the evening breeze. The streets grow quieter as you make your way back toward the river. The clamor of markets, the music from courtyards, the slow, weighted pace of temple rituals, all of it has thinned to the occasional murmur of voices or the creak of a cart wheel turning lazily. The air feels different now, stripped of its earlier layers, as if the city is letting go of its perfumes one by one. The Nile lies ahead, dark and broad under the fading light. At this hour, it doesn't sparkle, it absorbs the sky's last colors, turning them into a muted wash of blues and grays. You walk down to the bank, your feet sinking slightly into the cool, damp soil, and breathe in. The river's own scent rises to meet you, clean, mineral, with a faint whisper of silt. But even here, away from the crowded heart of Thebes, the city's fragrances have followed. A trace of lotus from the gardens, a thread of myrrh from the market, a curl of incense from the temple, it's all there, woven into the night air like the lingering chorus of a song. You can almost match them to faces you've seen, voices you've heard, places you've walked through. On the far bank, a fisherman is pulling in his net. His movements are slow, patient, the kind that suggest he's done this every evening for decades. The breeze shifts, and you catch a faint, unexpected sweetness drifting from him, oil rubbed into his skin, perhaps as much for himself as for anyone else. Even here, in the quiet work of the river, perfume lingers. You sit down on a flat stone, watching the current move past. In the distance, a boat drifts by, its oars dipping into the water in slow, deliberate rhythm. Somewhere on board, someone is burning a small cone of incense, and the smoke trails behind the vessel like a signature on the water's surface. It's strange to think how much of this city is built on the unseen. Scent has no walls, no monuments, no statues carved to last for millennia. Yet here it is, carrying memories through time, surviving in sealed jars, in the fibers of old linen, in the descriptions scratched onto papyrus. Egyptian men wore perfume to court lovers, to declare status, to speak to gods, but maybe, above all, they wore it to be remembered. The sun is gone now, and the first cool breath of night slides in from the desert. You close your eyes, letting the sounds of the river take over, the lap of water against stone, the distant call of a night bird, the soft rush of reeds swaying in the current. The scents fade slowly, as if the city is tucking them away until morning. Your thoughts grow slower, your body heavier. The last image in your mind is the glimmer of oil on the river's surface, catching the last light of day before dissolving into the current. And then, gently, the city of Thebes drifts away. The night deepens, and so does the quiet. The fragrances that have been your companions all evening dissolve one by one, until the air is simple again, cool, dark, and still. The distant city is only a memory now, softened at the edges, its scents folded into dreams. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the slow breathing of the river, steady as sleep itself. The past has no rush. It waits here, patient, until someone comes along to remember it again. So let the last of the day slip away. Feel your shoulders sink, your breath slow. Imagine the soft lap of water against the bank, the weight of warm air on your skin, the faint, fading trace of lotus and myrrh in the night. Let the images blur, their colors dimming until all that remains is the calm. The river will still be here in the morning, carrying its stories, its perfumes, its secrets. For now, it's enough to drift with it. End of script. Sweet dreams.